Hey guys, good morning and welcome back to AMC. Decided to do the commentary for Round 5 with my morning coffee this morning. Let's see, check my notebook here. This is Round 5 Connecticut Regional, and we have LanniKrossing versus LanniKraken. Looks like Crossing on the left there, played by Brian, and the Kraken deck on the right, played by James. Good luck, guys. Yeah, decided to get up a little early this morning and get the commentary done before I left for work. Enjoying some coffee. Nothing like some morning thrones. Five-card setup. Always like to see that. Wow. That is very interesting start. Ooh, so right off the bat, a little bit of controversy in my opinion. The crossing player put the attachment on one guy and then was deciding to put it on somebody else, though he was doing that after he saw his opponent's setup. So that actually brings up a very interesting topic that I've been meaning to discuss for a little while, and that is tournament etiquette and takebacks. I know it's a little bit of a controversial topic. People have different opinions than I do. I have a very strong opinion on this, that unless you work it out with somebody ahead of time, like sometimes I do if I'm playing with close friends, if we get paired together in a tournament, where we say, hey, you know, let's make sure the best deck advances here and not try to dick each other on the rules. I'm not going to let anybody do any sort of take-back at all, especially at a regional level. Store Championship, Game Night Kit, maybe. But here, if my opponent flips over his setup and puts an attachment on somebody, that's that. Like, you can ask me if you can take it back, but I'm not going to let you. I'm sorry. That is just how I feel about it. We're playing at the highest level. If you take an action and take your hand off the card, that's a done action. Obviously, some players feel differently, and I have no problem with takebacks being done throughout the tournament. Just in my games, I prefer to play very strict when I'm at the tournament, regional and above level. But clearly, James was not bothered by this. This one, in my opinion, was a little more egregious, actually, because he flipped his setup, had his attachment, and then had extra information after he placed the attachment to then change who he wanted that attachment on. Now, whether he used that extra information or not, I don't know that he necessarily saw Jaime and saw Wendemir and then decided to not put that attachment on Tyrion and change it. But I don't know. Clearly the players don't have a problem with it, so I guess I shouldn't either. But don't try to do that against me. Not allowed. Okay. So on to the game. We have a Noble Cause versus a Summons. Looks like James took Asha.
I like the red sleeves with the gray joy.
Dropping some chuds. It's, I think, a really good feeling when you're playing to be able to get two permanent economy cards out by turn one. That I always feel so good and so confident when you can do that. Especially this early in second edition when not a lot of people are running location control. Now you know you can rely on an extra $2 every round. And that's such a good feeling. I know a lot of people like the King's Roads, but I'm sure you've heard me say it before. I much prefer the long-standing, long-game type economy cards. And that's probably just because I'm generally a control-type player rather than a rush-type player. So we've got a dupe on Tyrion.
Debating.
Things are pretty even.
Make sure I
If James can drop one more character, I think the board state will be pretty fair. Interesting to note that James there on the right really doesn't have any characters to speak of other than Jamie. The stealth on Wendemir is excellent, and I love Wendemir. I think stealth is very important in 2nd edition. But it's going to be tough for James to have any sort of effective challenge phase without kneeling himself out and leaving himself exposed. But unless Brian on the left can drop a military icon, James probably doesn't really care. He's got the economy, he's got cards. Uh-oh, looks like he's getting ready to drop somebody big. Maybe a Jamie of his own. Sounds like Tywin. Or Gregor. I'm betting Tywin. Show me Tywin. There he is. So now the economy battle is equal. And a seal of the hand. Alright, well this match just changed drastically. Tywin with the seal on him is very intimidating. Suddenly, James's board is not looking so hot. That's got to be very frustrating. Tywin is baller enough by himself, let alone being able to stand at will. That's going to give that's going to give Brian 2 power every round if he uses Tywin effectively. My goodness. It is nice to have, looks like the rating vessel for James. So that will be doing a ton of work for him today. And I don't know why he wouldn't use the rating ship there and just guarantee the unopposed. Maybe he's saving it. Maybe he forgot. So this is actually something I wanted to point out. So Brian just used the seal to stand Tywin right there. I actually don't like that move. I prefer to wait to use a trigger until you have to use it. I mean, effectively, it doesn't really make a difference, but it does give James extra information to make his challenges with. Like, I don't know. There's other situations where it becomes more specific as to why I don't like doing that. And yes, James knows Brian's going to stand Tywin with the seal eventually, but I like waiting until you're going to attack with Tywin or defend with Tywin or have a need for him to be stood before you actually stand him. Because, maybe James honestly just forgets to see the seal and sees Tywin kneeling and makes a challenge. It gives, by standing Tywin, you're removing an opportunity for your opponent to make a mistake by forgetting that seal is there and forgetting that Tywin can stand. So I would have waited until I was ready to use Tywin for either an attack or a defense before I decided to trigger the seal. Give your opponent every opportunity to do the wrong thing. And this is something that I forget, and I have to remind myself over and over and over again. I find myself analyzing the board state and situation and assuming that my opponent is thinking exactly what I'm thinking. And I used to make mistakes like this all the time, that assuming my opponent has the same level of knowledge and the same thoughts about the board state that I do, forgetting that obviously people think differently. So never assume that your opponent knows what you know. Never assume that your opponent is going to do what you think he's going to do. And never give him credit for having an understanding of the board state that you do. And what I used to do actually is, I used to talk to myself throughout the game while I was playing. And I would say, I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to do this, because then you'll do that and you'll do that. And then occasionally I would see the dawn of realization on my opponent's face that he wasn't even considering doing what I assumed he would do, what I assumed the optimal play would be. It hadn't even crossed his mind. And he now was going to make that optimal play because I just told him that was the optimal play through talking to myself. So when you're playing a game, give your opponent every opportunity to make a mistake. Don't assume he knows what the optimal play is. and let him walk into a mistake.
I will go first.
If I'm not mistaken, it looks like he dropped calling that got hit with naval. Not that big a deal for him, given that he's still going to get the 4 gold from calling and 2 additional gold from his economy locations. So it's always nice to take economy away from your opponent, but you know, hitting calling the banners with naval is generally not the target you're looking for. But 3 gold is 3 gold.
Alright, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Here comes Gregor.
7.
Yikes! James does not like to see that. I did play LanniCrossing in this tournament. I went 5-1, and Gregor was a big reason for that. Almost throughout the day, he was certainly more effective for me on the day than Tywin. I don't know that I'm ready to say that I would rather see Gregor than Tywin, but I would say they are on equal footing in my mind right now. He was so vital to getting characters off the board, collecting renown, and just making it difficult for your opponent to deal with. If he didn't have stealth on the board, he wasn't going to be able to deal with Gregor in initiating his own military challenges. He's such a great card. It made me chuckle when everybody was sort of shitting on him when he was spoiled. Oh, how is Lannister going to afford another 7-cost card? With an effect like Gregor, you find a way to pay for it. You find a way to cheat him into play, which is why the Lannister Crossing deck with those events was born. Because even if you get Gregor into play for a single phase and use him as a disposable single-use character, he's still worth it. That's how good he is.
Power for 2.
Super cool playmat from James, I should say. I can't really tell what dragon it is, but I like the full bleed playmats that people come to. It's part of my favorite parts of going to a tournament, actually, is seeing people's table dressing.
Intrigue 4.
Tyrion doing some work, getting both players some economy here. Here comes Hound. Jumpy Hound. I wish I could sort of understand the thematic reason behind giving the Hound ambush. It's been a long time since I read the books, so maybe I'm just not remembering, but I don't remember too much as to why the Hound should have ambush or return to hand. Usually I can sort of understand the thematic Nedley reasons behind cards having certain effects, but this is not one of those cards for me. But please, correct me if I'm wrong, tell me what I'm forgetting. I always like to learn new things.
Military.
Huge military challenge. This Lannister Crossing deck does rely on put to the swords, and it looks like he does have 2 gold left. So this could be bad.
Win effect. Yep.
Tyrion. Yes, you will. Excellent choice, sir. Get rid of his economy,
Claim.
his on-demand economy.
Pillage.
You win.
4 doesn't
So-
kill anybody.
Power.
Little mistake there. That newly made lord should be going into the dead pile from Gregor's pillage.
Okay. Fair enough. And then renown.
Everybody's proud of me that I caught a play mistake probably for the first time. A rules mistake.
That will be unopposed.
So this Lannister Crossing deck, I know that a lot of times you guys hear me yell at people for kneeling out their board. But the Crossing deck is sort of an exception here. The way Lord of the Crossing plays, if you guys have not played it, you have to sort of decide ahead of time that you're not going to really defend your opponent's challenges unless they're really going to hurt you, because you need your characters to initiate all 3 of your challenges in order to get that extra power from Lord of the Crossing, which is sort of what makes the deck effective. It helps you rush a little bit faster to your 15. You'll notice we're at turn 2, and Brian is already sitting on 5, 6, 7, 8 power. Easily in range of closing, especially that he's actually hard cast Gregor and he has Tywin in play. So he's got 2 renowns on board. He can easily close next turn. and you're really not interested in your opponent's challenges because you know that if things go well for you, you can get to 15
Ambush in.
before your opponent does, even if you let most of his challenges go unopposed. And frankly, you're killing enough of his characters that he's not going to be able to initiate a whole lot of challenges anyways. And it's just a ton of fun to play. Kudos to Lucas, who developed this deck originally, if my understanding is correct. It's such a fun deck to play. It doesn't play like any other sort of Thrones deck I've ever played. It's very, it's as close to the type of deck I like to play that exists in 2.0 right now, because there's so much hidden information that your opponent has to deal with because he never knows what's in your hand if you're going to drop one of those events to do a character in. He has to initiate his challenges not knowing whether you're going to drop in a 10 strength military character for free. And that is incredibly frustrating to deal with. And that's my #1 goal in Thrones. Winning, losing, the key to every game and winning every game is to frustrate your opponent and confuse him. And if you can do that and throw off his game plan by messing with his head, it's always effective in giving you the upper hand. And that's sort of why 1.0 started to fall apart at the end, in my opinion, because it got to the point where the builds were so predictable and so steady that towards the end, as soon as you saw somebody's house card and agenda, you could almost predict 50 out of the 60 cards of their deck. Excuse me. Sorry, drinking my coffee here. And that got a little bit tiresome. So you'd sit down at a tournament, and the matchups were already sort of so well defined that if I was playing Stark and I sat down against somebody playing Lannister, I pretty much knew I was already going to lose the game unless I got lucky. And that's frustrating. I think in 2nd edition they're doing a great job where you can sit down from somebody, maybe with Greyjoy Fealty being sort of the exception, and no matter what house they're playing, you really don't know what's going to be in their deck. It's still that exciting time in 2nd edition. And even if you do know what's in their deck, I feel like there's so many even matchups right now. The game is still a ton of fun to play. There's not a lot of predictability. And I do feel like I can win every game that I play regardless of opponent. Like matchup-wise, I'm talking about here, not skill-wise. You never really feel hopeless. Looks like we have a first snow versus a calm here.
Start with an intrigue for 3, stealthy.
Not good for James. First snow continues to shape this tournament. It's just an awesome plot, redefining the meta,
Tyrion Lenni, unopposed.
especially out of a house like Lannister with huge high-cost characters. You'll notice James' board's still completely full. He's going to put a hurting on James here. And already with 11 power, I think we can see the direction this match is headed. While I work through this last challenge phase, give me a second here to promote the drawing for the playmat. I've officially set the time. It is going to be Sunday night, this coming Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern. I think I've figured out most of the kinks with the streaming. We were doing some testing yesterday, and I think the audio and video issues seem to have been resolved. So if you come to the YouTube channel on Sunday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll do a little Q&A. I can give you guys an update about what's going on with the channel, and we will do the drawing live for the playmat. So I hope to see you guys there.
Nerve-wracking game for sure.
Something that I notice when I play a lot. Notice on the right there how James is sort of holding his hand, not really looking at the cards anymore, just sort of playing with them, flicking them. I always take that as sort of a sign that somebody's given up, because they're no longer looking for their answers. They know they don't have any solutions in their hand, and they're just sort of waiting for their opponent to close out. So take a look at that, guys, when you're playing. If your opponent's doing that, and he's not looking at his hand until claim for an intrigue challenge is about to be assessed, you may be further ahead than you realize. Because sometimes people do that when you think that you're losing, but when they're doing that, maybe you're actually ahead.
Win. Keywords, pillage.
Stand Tywin.
Oh.
So Brian's got, let's see, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 power.
I think you're right.
That's a good thing.
You're right.
So, dominance?
Yep, you win dominance.
Oh, that was a little weird. They were debating whether or not there's an action window after challenges end, and there is. So Tywin should have been able to stand. He should have gotten dominance for 15. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. I don't know, maybe I misunderstood the point at which they were debating whether there's an action window or not. The phase ends when both players pass actions, so if you're not in a challenge and both players pass, the phase will be over. That's actually another interesting thing that I wanted to talk about maybe in a rules video. If I forget next round, remind me. But if you are the second player and your opponent says he's done with challenges, you can end the phase immediately just by saying no challenges. And I can explain why that matters a little bit next game. But it's something that I've used effectively if I need to jump straight to dominance for any particular reason.
I'll be the first player.
So we have a confiscation and it looks like an alt art marched there.
Yeah, I was trying to.
Shouldn't really affect the outcome of this game.
There's almost guaranteed one for 2, and there's a possibility of 2.
There, in the background there, once again, we hear some Chris Lavin. Can't have a game without hearing from him. Love Chris. Love all of Boston, really. Good people. Which is weird, because growing up, I sort of hated Boston being a Yankees fan. I thought they were all kind of assholes. But who knew? They're not. Though I think if Lauren and Britt had those stupid accents, I'm not sure I'd be friends with them. I don't know that I could listen to that all the time. I like Pycelle. I think he's a great card. Anytime you can get those icons for cheap, as well as Insight. Insight, I think, is probably one of the best keywords in the game right now. I like it better than Renown and Intimidate. I love card advantage and card draw. It's so important. And really, it's the more you draw. Like, I mean, there's an old saying in Thrones: when you draw, you win. You play the game of Thrones, you draw or you lose, essentially.
Like, oh, here's my burn man. Military.
Overall, this deck's trying to play a fair game. That's not fair.
Tyrion. Love Tyrion.
You win. Yeah, his trigger.
James knows the game's over. Doesn't really matter what he does here. Brian can win with Renown on a defense. A valiant effort. For what it's worth, I think the LanniKraken deck is actually a better deck at this point. I played the LanniCrossing in this tournament, and I played. James was my only loss in Swiss. Now that I think about it, he did beat me, he played well. He's a good player. It was just a bad matchup. I think maybe his deck just crapped out a little bit. So yeah, there wasn't much after game chat this time, so obviously you're seeing that now. But I will see you tomorrow for the next round, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye.